With a vote, the House just got rid of the taxes. 219 to 211 Republicans voted with the other side. The president's own party just told him that his plan for Canada is not working. I have to tell you the truth. I wasn't expecting to find what I did when I started to take this story apart. There is no trade war going on here. It's a battle. And the castle wouldn't give up. This is what I mean. Think about this. The 10th of February is Monday. On social media, the president says that he will not let a brand new $6.4 billion bridge between Detroit and Windsor open. He says that both sides belong to Canada. He says that almost none of the materials used were from the United States. He wants the U.S. to own at least half of it. Each and every claim is not true. A deal made by a Republican governor in 2012 says that Michigan already owns half of it. American steel. People from the United States built the Michigan side. Canada paid the whole amount. The next morning, the Prime Minister calls him. Give 4 facts and the problem will be solved before lunch. But this is where things get tricky. The threat wasn't just that bridge incident. It wasn't the 5th. It wasn't even the 10th. Every week for more than a year now, there has been a new weapon aimed at Canada. Things like tariffs on everything, threats to decertify planes that are already carrying American passengers, annexation talk, blocking a bridge, ending trade talks over a TV commercial, sending officials to meet with separatists in Canada, and calling the Prime Minister governor out in public at international summits are all examples of unfair behavior. There is a new pressure point every week. Every week, someone tries again to break through the Canadian barrier. The same man always had an answer. What I'm about to show you changes everything, because when you put these threats in order, something comes out that no one in Washington thought would happen. Every threat showed Canada what the U.S. really wanted from them. And with each claim, Ottawa got a new piece of power it didn't know it had. It's important to know what Canada is on in order to understand why these threats keep coming. The area of this country is the second biggest in the world. It has the 3rd largest proven oil reserves in the world and the world's biggest fresh water reserves per person. It has large amounts of lithium, nickel, cobalt, uranium, and rare earth elements that the U.S. needs very badly to compete with China in areas like AI, semiconductors, electric cars, and military technology. And it owns the Northwest Passage, a route through the Arctic Sea that is becoming passable for the first time in recorded history because of climate change. This could be the most important trade route for national security in the 21st century. The math behind the effort to put pressure on is simple. Every single year, the U.S. needs more than $80 billion worth of vital minerals from Canada. China controls about 60% of the world's production of important minerals, and it has already shown that it is ready to use that power to hurt other countries by limiting exports. The American military, the American electric vehicle industry, and the American supply line for semiconductors all depend on materials that China could stop giving us at any time. Canada is the safest and closest option source on Earth. The strategy goal behind all threats and tariffs is to get control of those resources without paying full price. The Arctic is another place. Canada has power over 1/4 of the Arctic land and 1/3 of the Arctic coastline. The Northwest Passage goes through Canadian seas when the ice melts, and the route can be used by ships. The fastest sea route between the Atlantic and Pacific Oceans is controlled by the person who has it. It gets worse now. Officials called the administration's national security strategy a modern extension of the Monroe Doctrine. This is the same idea from the 1800s that said the United States should rule the whole Western Hemisphere. So Canada is not a sovereign partner in that case. There is some land in the American world that hasn't been brought into line yet. That's the background of every tax, threat, and joke about Canada being the 51st state. This is not a trade dispute over dairy, plane certification, or rules about digital streaming. Those are clear excuses. What they're really arguing about is whether Canada owns its own resources, waterways, and business ties, or if those things automatically belong to Washington. And the person in charge of Canada knew this before most of his own party did. Fentanyl was the first poison used against Canada and was used to explain everything that happened after. It was said that Canada was not stopping the flow of fentanyl into the US and had become a source of it. Powers for emergencies were used. It was called a national disaster. As a matter of public health, putting 25% taxes on all Canadian goods. But this is what no one is talking about. The numbers showed something very different. Almost all of the fens that U.S. Customs and Border Protection recovered between September 2024 and April 2025 came through the southern border with Mexico. Not even 1% was taken at the northern border with Canada. But the declaration of emergency gave the government the legal power to put tariffs in place without getting permission from Congress. The key that opened the legal power was the fentanyl framing. The main story was the public health problem. The taxes were the real goal. In response, Canada put taxes on American goods worth billions of dollars. There are now search charges from provincial governments. Ontario said it would stop sending power to New York, Michigan, and Minnesota. From the beginning, Ottawa's word was always the same. Every move taken by the U.S. would be met with the same quiet, methodical response. Then this took place. There was the 51st state talk on social media, at foreign summits, and in front of the Canadian Prime Minister. The goal was to make Canada look bad by implying that its independence depended on the U.S.'s kindness. Language that is usually used to describe occupied areas was used to insult a G7 partner while the whole world watched. It went horribly wrong. Canadian nationalism reached a high point that hadn't been seen in decades. In every area, people stopped buying American goods. A poll of Canadians found that 71% said they were less likely to buy things made in the United States. The number of tourists coming to the U.S. dropped 40% from the previous year. 62% of Canadians polled said they had no plans to visit the U.S. at all for the next year. That threat from the 51st state became the Prime Minister's main campaign issue. He won the election in April by saying that Washington wanted to break up Canada so that it could take what Canada has. Because of the threat meant to make him look bad, he became Canada's most popular leader in years. Now comes the part that kept me up last night: the fear of an airplane. Reports revealed that there was a plan to decertify all Canadian-made planes and put 50% tariffs on them. A disagreement over certification was given as the reason. The trouble was that there were already about 1,000 planes made in Canada flying in the U.S. American Airlines had bought them and were using them on trips within the United States. If those planes lost their certification, it wouldn't hurt Canada. It would stop American Airlines planes that were already in the air. In less than 24 hours, the threat was taken back. Officials told reporters in a quiet voice that it only applied to new planes and not to planes that were already in use. The process of getting certified kept going according to plan. The 50% tax never came into effect. It was getting easier to see the pattern. The reveal made the news. The execution fell apart because it didn't make sense. Instead of responding to the first noise, Canada waited it out, and the threat went away quietly. That's not even the whole story. It wasn't a tariff that was the most interesting thing that happened in this whole pressure effort. There was a meeting. There were rumors that government leaders had met with extreme right-wing separatists in Alberta, Canucks who wanted to separate their province from the rest of the country. Washington had done more than just threaten trade. It was now openly trying to break up Canada's political unity. Take a moment to think about that. Officials from the world's most powerful country meeting with people from an ally country to talk about breaking up that country. It was easy to understand. But if Canada won't change its trade rules, the U.S. will try to get the oil-rich state to leave. There was no panic in the reaction. It was government. Federal and local leaders showed up in public together. The drive for national unity went across provincial lines on purpose. Even Albertans who had real problems with Ottawa felt very uncomfortable when they saw foreign officials meeting with their own people to talk about breaking up their country. Because Washington was involved, the secession movement looked less like a problem within the country and more like something planned from outside. And this is what no one is talking about. In all of these dangers, there were people in the United States who needed the thing that was being threatened just as much as people in Canada did. Michigan had to have the bridge. The trade route was important for American automakers. American companies were using planes made in Canada. Canadian fertilizer was important to American farmers. North American oil was used in American plants. There was no point of pressure where blocking Canada wouldn't also block something American. That is the main problem with the whole plan. One man saw it from the start. Something happened in January of this year that changed everything. The Prime Minister of Canada went to Davos, Switzerland for the World Economic Forum. He got there before the President of the United States. That order was done on purpose, and he gave a speech that changed the way people around the world talked. He told everyone in the room that the international order built on rules was over, not just ending. He said that big countries had started to use trade as a weapon, tariffs as a bargaining chip, and supply lines as weak spots to take advantage of. He used the work of the Czech author Václav Havel to compare the old global order to a store owner who puts up a sign every morning that says, "Workers of the world, unite." Not because he believes it, but because every store owner on every street does it too. The system stays in place not because it is true, but because everyone is willing to act like it is. He told the people there that places of business and nations should take down their signs. What I'm about to show you changes everything. He said something that became the most important part of the whole speech. People in the middle need to work together because if you're not at the table, you're on the menu. A standing applause was given to him. At Davos, that doesn't happen very often. The leaders of Europe cheered. Analysts from around the world said it was the most important speech a Canadian leader had given in decades. A big think tank said it was the first time the leader of a close ally of the United States had the guts to say, "Enough is enough." He made Canada look like it wasn't a target of American pressure, but rather the leader of a new group of countries that wouldn't give in to economic pressure. Washington's reaction came right away, that if Canada made a trade deal with China, they would put 100% taxes on all of their goods. It was governor time again for the Prime Minister. It was easy to understand. You will lose money if you don't diversify your trade ties. But this is where things get tricky. There was already a deal with China. Before the social media post with the threat, a deal was made and signed in Beijing. China agreed to cut taxes on Canadian canola seed from 84% to 15% as part of the deal. There would be no more duties on Canadian canola meal, lobster, crabs, or peas. In return, Canada would let up to 49,000 electric cars from China into its market every year at a tariff rate of just over 6%. A single deal can open up new export markets worth billions of dollars. The deal with China was not a free trade deal. That was made clear by the Prime Minister. Canada said it had no plans to go after a full free trade agreement. The agreement only brought back and changed tariff levels on certain car and farming industries. But the timing was terrible for Washington. It was after the kiss that China made the threat to punish Canada for going after China. It gets worse now. Then there was the Ontario ad episode. An ad for the Ontario provincial government was shown on TV in the US. The ad used the voice of former President Ronald Reagan from a radio speech he gave in 1987 to argue against tariffs. The ad ran while the World Series was going on. It was a volcanic response. There were no longer any trade talks with Canada. A 10% increase in tariffs was reported on top of the 35% that was already in place. While talking about a Republican president in a TV ad, the ad was taken down by Ontario's leader. He said he would pull an ad if it meant starting talks that would protect millions of jobs in Canada. The extra 10% tax was never put in place. But the episode showed something very important. It had nothing to do with trade strategy that the goals were picked. A billboard, a bridge, and a way to get certified. That each one was seen as a betrayal. Each one was a reason to make things worse that had nothing to do with the real problem. Then, the image of a government pulling a TV ad because a foreign president thought it was insulting made something that tariffs couldn't make. People in Canada used their wallets as guns. There were reports that the sales of one of the biggest American whiskey brands in Canada dropped by more than 60%. The leaders of the company said that the boycott was worse than any tax. The provincial governments put Canadian goods to the front of the shelves in liquor stores. American goods were taken out of public places. Travel agencies said that bookings to American sites dropped sharply. This wasn't put together from the very top down. People from all walks of life watched as their country was pushed around and decided to do something about it. This is what no one is talking about. The speech at Davos wasn't just empty words. In just 6 months after taking office, the Prime Minister signed 12 new trade deals with countries on 4 continents. Diversifying trade wasn't something that was talked about. It was already part of a plan. Every threat from Washington made it happen faster. Every step up in the situation gave Ottawa the reason it needed at home to move faster. It turns faster when you push harder. Now it's February 2026, and things on the ground don't look at all like what Washington thought they would a year ago. By a vote of 219 to 211, the House of Representatives decided this week to get rid of duty on Canada. Republicans got along with each other. The president's own party broke up over his most important economic policy. Right away, he fought back on social media, saying that any Republican who votes against tariffs will have to deal with problems in the primaries. That's not even the whole story. Most of the tariffs, including some that are put on Canadian goods, are thought to be valid by the Supreme Court. They should make their decision any day now. The case questions the unusual use of emergency economic powers to support tariffs that were first based on the fentanyl. If the court goes against the government, they might have to pay back tens of billions of dollars in tariff money. Trade deals made with more than one country could be broken. The legal base on which the whole pressure effort is built could give way, and Canada has spent every single month of this trade war putting in place the systems it needs to handle that kind of instability. The China deal made it possible for farm exports worth billions of dollars. Canada became a leader in middle power cooperation through the Davos Alliance. A lot of money from Europe has been going into new alliances. Tens of billions of dollars were sent to Canadian suppliers by domestic procurement rules. The path changed, and in trade relationships, the direction is just as important as the place. What I'm about to show you changes everything. When you look past the individual threats, you can see a clear trend. The effort to put pressure on people was meant to do one of two things. Either Canada gives up and agrees to the terms set by the United States, or the country's economy will get worse until it has no choice. Neither result came true. Instead, Canada moved faster. Because of the fentanyl tariffs, trade diversity went into overdrive. The Prime Minister was given an election vote by the 51st state rhetoric. The deal with China was signed before anyone in Washington stopped warning Canada for going ahead with it. The airplane decertification failed because it didn't follow the law. After the bridge danger, there was a phone call and 4 facts. People in Canada were so upset about the Ontario ad that they decided to stop buying American goods on a large scale, which hurt big companies more than any government action could have. The United States had a stake in every target and needed it just as much as Canada did. Sends from both parties in Michigan fight back against the threat of the bridge. Car companies in the United States need the trade route. Canadian agricultural products are important to American farmers. American companies use crude oil from Canada. The main issue with this strategy is that the two economies are so closely connected that every bomb aimed north goes off at the same time in south. The Gordie Howe Bridge is also about to open. Canada paid for the whole $6.4 billion crossing, which is owned by both Canada and Michigan, and was built with American steel and American workers. In 2017, the president backed it and said it was an important business link between the two countries. Now he tried to stop it, but the governor, senators, and past governors of Michigan all spoke out against it. The bridge will handle hundreds of millions of dollars worth of trade, adding a new route to the northern border's biggest trade corridor. The owners of the other private bridge are big donors to the political group that tried to stop it. This might have changed how you see things, because I keep coming back to this. The United States is still where Canada sends about 2/3 of its goods. You really do count on that. It doesn't go away after a speech in Davos or a deal is made in Beijing. Both sides are aware of how vulnerable they really are. The path has changed, though. That 2/3 share has moved a little each month that this trade war has been going on. More manufacturing trade with Europe, new customers in Asia, and new deals for farming. The path changed, and the review of the trade deal at the end of the year will show if Washington knows what happened in the last year. The American negotiating team will be ready for a Canada that has been under a lot of pressure for a year and is ready for some relaxation. When they get there, they will find a country that used the pressure every week to make things it didn't have before. A country whose leader told the world, if you are not at the table, you are on the menu, at the world's most important economic summit. And then sat down at 12 more tables before Washington could see them. What do you think about this? The trend is clear to me from where I'm sitting. At least one new threat came out every week, and each one made Canada less reliant on the country that made it. Where do you think this comes from?